everybody. I'll say a few words up front, if that's okay, and then we'll take some questions. This is a continuation of this exact group just met in a smaller conference room, so we've gone to a bigger room to accommodate a larger crowd. And that in turn had followed a 30-minute or so conference call that we had done earlier than that. So we're coming up on the better part of an hour of briefings and back and forth. So good morning, everybody. And I'm honored to be joined, obviously, by DOT Commissioner and Board Chair Diane Gutierrez-Scacchetti and Executive Director of NJ Transit Kevin Corbett and their outstanding team. As I said, we've spent the better part, either in person or on the phone, of an hour or so this morning being briefed on the recent spate of train delays and cancellations that have understandably tested and frayed the nerves of NJ Transit rail riders in particular, although I want to make sure with Mike here and his team that we always remember, and I'm as guilty of this as anybody, that this is an organization that has sprawling rail and bus networks. The network that's causing most of the angst is on the rail side. And just as importantly, we discussed both some immediate ways and some intermediate ways we can work to improve things as quickly as possible. I don't blame, let me just say this most importantly, commuters one bit for their anger or cynicism. I don't blame them at all. None of us do. And if they're angry, I think they've got good company around this table for different reasons perhaps, but let there be no doubt that as it relates to NJ Transit, the commuter is on the pedestal here, and they have every right to be upset. Part of the reason I fought so hard to increase the funding for NJ Transit in the budget was to make the system work better. This investment is key to building that stronger and fairer state that we talk about so much. I don't think we've ever thought otherwise, but fixing NJ Transit is going to be a multi-year process. Let's not fool ourselves about that. We are climbing out of a deep hole after 8 years of failure, in particular as it relates to NJ Transit by the Christie administration. And I will just tell you the hypocrisy of our friends on the other side of the aisle who have now chosen this moment in time to speak up is jaw-dropping. I'm not surprised, but it is nonetheless jaw-dropping after they sat on their hands for 8 years and saw this organization ravaged. This is not acceptable, period, full stop. The buck stops with us, but we can and must do a better job sooner. Many of the frustrating last-minute cancellations have stemmed from unscheduled call-outs by engineers. As to these instances, our administration is making it known that we need and expect everyone to report to their jobs as scheduled. I've also directed Diane and Kevin and their teams to explore all other potential short-term fixes to ameliorate these annulments and delays. As it relates to last-minute call-outs, let me just say two things, if I may. The overwhelming majority, as in many cases this is the case, the overwhelming majority of the engineers and everybody who comes to work and wears the NJ Transit uniform or badge are doing everything you'd want them to. They're working their tails off. They're highly trained. They're highly motivated. In some cases, we're running them ragged. There's, like everything else, there's a small population who are spoiling it for the broader population. And I know these folks are doing the level best to make that population as a percentage of the total population as small as possible. Secondly, under no circumstances, and I understand the frustration and the anger, let us please not take this out physically or even aggressively, verbally on the folks that you're dealing with out there. There have been a couple of instances where there's been some amount of violence directed toward folks. Please, we'll figure this out together. We understand the anger and the cynicism. but we got to do this in a peaceful way, and we will. But listen, the fact of the matter is, if one person calls out, you should wonder how could that lead to the cancellation of an entire train and the inconvenience, therefore, depending on the line, of thousands of commuters. So these cancellations also speak to an extreme lack of trained and certified engineers, and ultimately to the damaging defunding of NJ Transit throughout Governor Christie's term. I'll give you two examples. The engineering class, I believe in 2009, was furloughed, and there was no class in 2010. So NJ Transit, those are 2 years, but we can drown you with statistics. At its peak, we had over 400 engineers. We're now down to 330 something. You need 291 to make the show go any day of the week. So the bench has been thinned dramatically over the past 8+ years. We're doing everything we can to turn that around, but these are highly sophisticated, highly trained jobs, and you can't sort of on a dime get somebody in to replace. This is a period of training that is, in many respects, specific, not just general training, but specific to the NJ Transit system. We actually lost 47, as I alluded to, and I think the number is actually even more, engineers over the prior 7 years alone. Now, I'm happy to report that NJ Transit just graduated 9 new engineers, all of whom will be in service, I believe, next week. While this number is moving in the right direction, we will need many more in both bus and rail positions to ensure the systems run on time. Diane and Kevin and team have updated me on the number of new applicants NJ Transit has already interviewed. I hope there are many more to come. And I urge anyone who's watching who has the skills needed to visit njtransit.com to apply to become part of the NJ Transit team. And I would also say, not just sort of in the day in and day out process of recruiting that these folks are on top of, but also thinking creatively. How can we somehow augment this? For instance, and I'm not an engineer, perhaps you're a highly skilled, highly trained engineer on another commuter line or perhaps a freight line. That NJ Transit could have you come over and still need to train you on the specifics of NJ Transit system, but shrink that 20-month training program maybe meaningfully, I don't know, maybe in half. So those creative juices are flowing, and they need to flow. Now, other cancellations have been planned months in advance, so that in particular NJ Transit can implement positive train control technology along its system, which is designed to help prevent collisions and derailments. These are necessary interruptions so NJ Transit can meet the federal PTC mandate, which has been pushed back time and again by years of underfunding and poor decisions from prior management and the prior administration. Let's remember, PTC installation isn't a problem. PTC is a solution to a problem. And I want to say that the progress that's been made on PTC, by the way, the deadline is December 31st, 2018 at midnight, not that we're counting. The progress that's been made in 6 to 7 months dwarfs in many respects the progress that was made in the prior, frankly, 6 to 7 years. I believe, Kevin, correct me if I'm wrong, when you all took stewardship, we were 13% of the way there, and we are now 50-odd? 58. 58% of the way there. That's in 6 months, essentially, 6+ months. So these folks have done an extraordinary job, but they've got a ways to go. And it depends, and I'm not, as I say, I'm not an engineer or a technician or an expert here. Some of this is more challenging than others, and the particular piece that's challenging are the actual vehicles, the cars themselves, because we've got a bunch of different vintages, different types. It's a whole complex software and other challenge. That's going to be the hardest part to get from here to there. We will get there, but let there be no doubt, enormous progress has been made in 6 or 7 months, much more so than many years before. Frankly, if we had sort of a regular drumbeat of this process over the past 6 or 7 years, the vehicle challenge, which is the biggest, would have been dealt with over that period of time in sort of a sequential, logical way. And so we again have a ways to go, but we've made a lot of progress. However, one thing is clear, that these pre-planned changes in service related to the installation of PTC haven't been adequately, I think we all agree, haven't been adequately communicated to the public. Commuters cannot be expected to read a press release that's put out months ago on a one-time only basis and expect to remember that, come August, you're going to have a change to your service. Commuters have a right to know when the situation changes so they can reasonably adjust their schedules. We owe them that. So I'm going to say ordered, but I think this is a consensus conclusion, but one strongly held by me, a much more robust and direct communication strategy that will have predetermined service changes due to PTC implementation clearly posted in every affected station where commuters will be able to see them every day until that service interruption ends. I think consumers appreciate the importance of PTC to ensuring their safety. They get that. I firmly believe that we're simply upfront with them about what service interruptions due to PTC implementation are. They'll be understanding. But we've not done our side of the bargain. We have to make that effort. We talked earlier in the prior iteration of this meeting about going on a war room footing, in particular through December 31st, not just in the operations, whether it be rail or bus, but in the coordination as well of communication, sort of a war room mentality. Kevin mentioned, and Diane was brilliant at this, when we had the snowstorm challenges, we were in a war room mentality in our communication, not just in the substance of the work we were doing. That's the footing that we need to be on right now, and this team is committed. That's in fact the footing they will be on. Diane, Kevin, the management of NJ Transit, and I all share a common goal: to return this system to national prominence. We aren't going to be able to undo the near decade of defunding and detached leadership that the last administration put forward toward NJ Transit overnight. But what we can do immediately is get back as best as we can to being commuter focused. As I said, I am committed to getting NJ Transit right and firmly believe and am positive that we'll get there. A safe and reliable mass transit network is central to the stronger and fairer New Jersey that we envision. You've heard me say this before: when you're the fourth smallest state in the nation geographically, which we are, if you're the densest state in the nation, which we are, if you sit beside, right up here, the largest market in the world, or in South Jersey, near one of the largest markets in the country, getting transit right is existential. And it's not just existential for the individual commuter, it is, or for the system in of itself. It's existential to our economic viability. I cannot tell you how many conversations I've personally had, never mind our broader teams, with families considering to move here, or companies considering to move here, or in each case to stay here. That transit, and commuter transit in particular, is at or near the top of everybody's. I'd say, along with public education, those are the two top items you hear in literally every single conversation. However, listen, let me just say this. Notwithstanding the vision that we're committed to, the recent spate of last-minute cancellations cannot be tolerated, and it will not be tolerated by me or anybody at this table. I think with that, we'll take some questions. Is that all right with you all? We'll take some questions. Thank you. Who's talking to me? Brian. Brian.
Two questions. One, how you get around the union contract on the unofficial days? And the second one is, would you consider, or would you ask your board to consider, any kind of refund or discount for this summer of hell for monthly passengers?
First of all, Brian, I want to say to you and all your colleagues how much I missed you. I will let Diane and or Kevin address both of those questions, but I want to say on the latter, we have committed to no fare increase at NJ Transit at least until next June 30th. And in fact, on the Atlantic, just to my right, in the Atlantic City line, where we're going to, thanks to Mike and his team, we're going to lay in a significant bus complement to offset the closure of that line for PTC purposes. We are instituting, I believe, a 25% discount. So the answer is yes. I think it'll be on a case by case, but I'll leave it to you all to discuss either anything related to the first question on unions or anything on discounts that I missed. Either one of you?
Sure.
Maybe, Brian, I'll touch on the union issue. We have a collective bargaining agreement. There are policies and practices. I would like to emphasize the great majority of engineers are responsible. They've been working. A lot of them are doing voluntary overtime they don't even necessarily need. So that being said, there is a disciplinary process that we follow, and we intend to make sure that is followed properly. But it's a case-by-case basis in that situation.
You want anything, Diane?
Yeah, Brian, before we also understand that there's the discipline side, but there's also the side that says we have a good relationship with our unions. We will engage them in conversations about ways we can cooperatively work together to resolve this. Union discussions are always two-pronged, right? There's amicable, good, strong discussions, and when those don't work, then we talk to the union about specific members. But at the end of the day, our union relationship is good. We rely on our engineers, and we rely on their leadership to help us, and we will be turning to them for that help.
Are any of these cases call-outs discipline issues? Have they gone for discipline?
It's premature to get there. I just reinforce what Diane said. We've been certainly talking to union leadership on the engineering side, and they're being responsive. I think we've seen today we only had 5 cancellations. Again, we do 690 plus trains a day, so 5 cancellations. If it's your one train, it's 100% for you. It's unacceptable. I'm not saying that any one cancellation even is acceptable, but 2 of those were due to manpower shortage. The other 3 were due to PTC moves that we had to make sure we had production. So, and that is certainly better from where we were than a few weeks ago. So
I'm having trouble seeing everybody today, so please. Let me go down front and then back, if I may.
A couple of years ago, Amtrak at Penn Station focused on what it called quality of commute, and we poured millions of dollars into temporary fixes such as air movers, portable air conditioners, things like that. And commuters really appreciated that. What is NJ Transit doing right now, right this minute, to bring some relief to people? We've heard about the engineering crisis. Okay, we've heard about better communication with PTC cancel trains. But what about the daily comfort for people?
I would just say, I want to reiterate something Kevin just said, and then maybe ask you, either of you, to give Elise a more specific answer. I'm thrilled that we're down to 5 cancellations today. That's 5 too many. And I want to make sure that we all understand the best thing we could do for commuters is to make sure that the train that they expect is going to come in on time and get them to where they want to get to, typically work or home, safely. And we want to bat 1,000. So that's the most important thing I think we can do for any commuter out there. I don't know much about the portable air, so I'll give that to you.
Yeah, I think at least when you start with the bigger picture, you have to drill down on metrics and performance to each individual facility. So I think by and large we do. You may not feel if your air conditioner is not on in a certain rail car. By and large we do. We have metrics of performance, mean distance between failure, a whole bunch of statistics. But I think the case you were talking about was the other day at Secaucus. And I think this goes back to the last 8-9 years of neglect. Anybody who really drills down in Eric's department, you get an MEP firm to come in, you do an asset, what's the life cycle cost? Can you do building maintenance systems, BMS? How do we tie that in so you have equipment that gives you warnings beforehand, not like the old days where the thing would just die out on you and you didn't have any warning? And that's proper management of life cycle costs of assets. And that has been sorely neglected. And what the governor's budget does is giving us the ability, Eric, the ability to have people go out, do those surveys, and be able to come back and say, okay, these chillers and coolers, we can get 5 more years. These have to be replaced immediately, or we can get variable drive motors, whatever. That really is drilling down, but that's what we need, and we have not had for the last 8 years.
Diane, you want to say?
Sure. So, Elise, to the extent that we dispatch people today to go out and try to fix that air conditioner, we do that. I don't know if we can put a portable AC unit on the Secaucus line. That's up to Ed and his team to look at. The things that we're doing are the things you saw yesterday at the board meeting. We are buying new rail cars. We are buying new buses. We are spending money on the quality product so that our customers can have a comfortable ride, and they can have enough cars on a train so they're not standing. But because these things haven't happened, I know we're going to be getting some delivered, but because there hasn't been good business planning year after year, cycle after cycle, so that you're ordering cars as you retire cars, and it's seamless to the customer, there's nothing that's going to happen today, tomorrow, that makes such an appreciable difference that you're not going to come and have this conversation with me next month. What we're doing today is everything we can to make certain that those kinds of amenities are available. We will go out and look at the Secaucus line. I do not know what can be done. That will be up to the staff here to come back and report to Kevin. Planning and good management started in February. You just got to give us time to actually start to see the fruits of that labor.
Sir.
If you're on war footing, what does that mean exactly? What changes are being made and what would we be doing in that war room?
Yeah, I think in addition to the operational intensity and what a lot of the stuff that Diane just talked about, so I won't repeat that, I think in particular, what I was referring to is the folding in of aggressive communication around that operational intensity. This is an extraordinary group of folks. I've gotten the chance to know them, in particular Kevin and Diane, obviously over the past 9 months, intensely. The team is outstanding. The mentality is the right mentality. I think if we were to be self-critical and look in the mirror and be tough on ourselves, I think it's that we need to be more aggressive communicating seamlessly what's going on operationally in real time. And so I think there is already a war footing mentality operationally. There has to be that continuation. I think we discussed in the prior meeting, at least until December 31st at midnight. But that has to include a very intense, aggressive communication of that. Please.
This is no longer the Christie's problem, it is your problem. The commuters just want to know when they will see some relief, and why a contingency plan was not put in place. You knew this deadline, you knew there would be maybe some tax cancellation. Why was this not planned for the month of August, July, when customers are experiencing that?
Yeah, I'll give you a general answer, and I'll ask Diane and Kevin to give you more specifics. I'm not willfully going around blaming the last guy for things that actually he had nothing to do with. In fact, you may have noticed in our cabinet, we've hired some of his folks in different areas. This is inescapable. This was 8 years of complete and utter negligence of the country's premier commuter rail and bus system. And so with all due respect, when you're talking about capital investments, when you're talking about years of neglect on positive train control, when the consultant was basically untethered to the work that it should have been doing, I'm going to call balls and strikes as I see them, and I'm calling this one a strike. There's just no escaping that. And so I'm not passing the buck. At the end of the day, we own this at the moment, and we're committed to getting this right. But I want folks who are watching out there to realize the mess that we're digging out of. If anything, I underestimated the mess. And by the way, I think we've done some of the things you're suggesting. Early on, we were just discussing this morning, Diane and Kevin organized the lend-lease arrangement of up to 40 cars, as I recall. That was done very quickly. We did a big event on the bus side with Mike and his team on manpower moves on the bus side of the house. You've got a particular issue within the engineering community, which is thin. The bench is thin. And it can't be corrected overnight. And so I'm not blaming the last folks for just sort of willy-nilly. The buck stops with us, but I want to make sure folks out there watching this understand why we're dealing with what we're dealing with.
So if just to be more specific, in 15 and 16, 10 engineers were trained and hired. If you don't measure your turnover rate, if you're not having classes, there is no contingency plan in June for August, because it takes 20 months to train an engineer. So 20 months from now, if we don't have engineers ready to go, then I will happily let the governor I'll take the blame. But at the end of the day, you're talking about a lead time that far exceeds 7 months for us to be able to address the manpower issues we're dealing with now. This is an organization run on human capital. I can have all the brand new cars I want, but if I don't have engineers, it does not matter. And the record is very clear. There was very little done to recruit engineers and train them in a timely fashion. We are trying to make up for that today.
Well, hearing that 4 of these engineers that you're saying will come on board next.
9.
No. All right, well, I'm hearing 4 of them, maybe they'll be next wrong.
No.
Not heard that. Can't
Not heard-
confirm that.
Not heard that. I would
But
also
if you have a
say-
particular source on that, can we speak afterward?
Yeah, I would add, we do have a plan, so it wasn't like, why didn't we? We had a very, detailed plan on that, and it was based on, we know people's vacations, people, the majority of our workforce, union and non-union, but our union workforce is great, the engineers, they're really doing yeoman's duty. Conductors are, really stretched thin, and they are doing good duty, and they're getting a lot of abuse, and, God bless them. But there was a plan. What the problem was, because we are so thin, for all the reasons Diane and the governor just mentioned, that we have at any time, it's not just one engineer is one train. One engineer will do 4, 5, 6 trips a day. We run, 700 trains roughly a day. So 9, even if it's like today, 5 annulments, it's the people we even built in a margin for, unexcused absences. But this summer we've had a much higher than traditional unexcused absence, and that is what has caused the problem. It wasn't that we did not have a plan or anticipate it.
Let's keep
They don't even show.
moving on. You all can grab. I want to take a couple more here, please, sir.
What are the unions saying to you, though? I mean, you may be talking to them, but they're not talking to us. Or at least they're not talking to me. Maybe it's me they don't like. But, what are they saying to you? What is their justification for anything?
It could be personal, by the way. I can't comment on that. I don't want to speak for the unions. I just want to reiterate, because I'm concerned about the clock, that the overwhelming amount of folks, and I've had the great opportunity to meet a lot of these folks, come in, whether it's on the bus or the rail side, trying to do the right thing every day, and they've been stretched as thin as can be. There were good conversations. Our front office had a good meeting with the leadership of the union yesterday. There's a good amount of common ground. There's a good amount of understanding of what, not only what I said, but there are some folks who are still, like any population, are not they're in the bad apple category. And I think there's attention on both their side. They'll have to speak for themselves, and on our side, NJ Transit in particular, to try to shrink that population as much as possible and as fast as possible while we grow the denominator, and that's what we're committed to. Anybody else, please? Yes.
It sounds like a lot of what you're addressing are management issues that don't necessarily cost a lot more money. But you've also said there needs to be an infusion of cash here. You spent months this year touting an increased investment in the agency. But the budget that was approved yesterday by the board here increases revenue by $98 million. That's less than the last budget increase last year, $107 million under Christie. So, I mean, how is there really an infusion of cash here?
There was a significant infusion of cash, Ryan. I would say this: the total budget relative to what we proposed is to the penny what the board signed on yesterday, to the penny. I'm not thrilled about a couple of the mix of the sources of that budget. I've said this many times before. This notion of borrowing Peter to pay Paul, which has become a Trenton master fine art. Unfortunately, I don't think we can extinguish overnight. But the budget, again, so there's some money coming in from places that is not where I would have had them coming in from. But the budget, the total amount of money that'll be put up against NJ Transit that the board approved yesterday is to the penny the budget that we proposed in March, and it is the budget that we believe has the highest chance of addressing the deficiencies that we've had. Money alone will not solve this problem, right? So money, great management, great continued outstanding cooperation with the unions, and again having the commuter up on the pedestal and the commuter's experience being the only thing we really care about, that it's on time, that it's comfortable, that it's safe. That's what this is about. Please, ma'am.
In the discussions that you had with the union officials, were you able to get any kind of a commitment to fewer of these call-outs? Meaning, are we going to see fewer canceled trains, unexpected canceled trains? And is there a way to also notify people when these unexpected cancellations happen. I know that you say
Yep.
that you're tweeting, but a lot of people end up on the platform. And
You bet.
the page just doesn't show.
Yeah, so I'll leave the particular progress question to Kevin and Diane in terms of where they are with the union. And again, I think there's a general understanding that we need to shrink that numerator of folks who are doing this, right? You mentioned the communication piece. We have to dominate the communication of that which we control. So when we make a decision collectively, as painful as it is for the Atlantic City line to go down beginning September 5th, I believe, for X number of months before the end of the year, that's a decision as painful as it is one that we came to collectively. We have to dominate the communication of that. There's no excuse. That which we can control, we must control. It's murkier if you have no notice. And I'll leave it to Kevin or Diane. I think you could do your level best to communicate stuff that you don't control, that you've got no notice on, but it's harder. They're committed to doing as good a job as possible. I'll defer to either of them on that front.
Yeah, I would say the fact that we have a significantly lower number of annulments the last few days than what we had last week and the week before. It's a phone call by phone call to each one of those that that aren't showing. But the union leadership has sent notice out to their rank and file that they really need them to step up, and I would suspect that the improved results we've seen is in large part due to that effort.
So Governor, there have been 2 vacancies on the board of New Jersey Transit since 2016. Do you have a time schedule on when you're going to fill those 2 appointments, or do you believe that the public members of the board are maybe not as necessary as other governors thought they were?
No, we believe the public members are exceedingly necessary. Again, you can't say what I said a minute ago, and that the objective has to have the commuter on the pedestal, and not say that the public input isn't important. So it is vitally important. We have we've already put up a number of different appointments across a whole range of bodies, and we're committed to filling out every board and agency as expeditiously as possible. I don't have a specific time frame on it, though. Please, one more. Are you okay with that?
For an explanation for the excused absences, and he said that one of the problems is that NJ Transit gives 5 sick days, and if a person uses those up early in the year and has to be called in sick, that's an unexcused absence. My question is that what they told you, and what could be done about that so they have enough sick days so you can drill down to the bad actors that you mentioned?
Kevin, you want to go?
Yeah, Larry, that's, there's policies in collective bargaining, and what the policy is, the 5-day, 5-day sick days. That is a true policy. I think the issue really gets into the New Jersey Transit policy that's somewhat different than other rail properties, where you had carryover of sick days and that use, so that gets into some of the weeds, but we're aware of that, and we took that into account initially when we were doing the plan that I mentioned to the young woman over there.
Are you looking to change that amount of sick days, possibly increase this or decrease them, or?
No, there's details of where that would do, because you have other issues that tie into it other than sick days. So we're committed to working with union leadership to make sure that the rank and file get the service time that they need, get the rest that they need, but also to make sure they show up. And we believe that they'll work with us on that.
Our daily is $6.94.
That's right.